is the facilitation of access to uninterrupted 9 years of formal education by providing free and compulsory basic education for every child of school age from the first year of primary school to the end of the junior secondary school. The UBEC Act has since it been in operation in the last 20 years, and Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC, has been responsible for the actualization of government policies pertaining to basic education. However, we have witnessed a progressive surge in the quantum of school children, of out-of-school children, due to various reasons, some of which are redeemable through amending the enabling laws. Against this background, this bill seeks to amend the UBEC Act 2024 to rejuvenate the objectives of the Act and reinforce the urgent need for the full implementation of the free, compulsory, and quantitative basic education for children in Nigeria. The intent of this bill is in furtherance of the Senate's resolutions on the motion presented to tackle the out-of-school children presented here on the 28th of March, 2024. I've listed some of the resolutions. However, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, it is important to review the law to ensure that a key provision of the UBE Act that empowers the local education authority within the states of the Federation and FCT to prosecute parents who deny their wards the right to basic education is implemented. The provision, no doubt, is meant to be a deterrent for parents who would prefer to engage their children in commercial activities or child labor, domestic chores, and non-curricular activities, including apprenticeship during school hours, and unfavorable cultural practices that prevent children from attending school. Thus, Section 4.2 of the UBE Act 2024, which exclude parents in the diaspora from being sanctioned, should be expunged. Consequently, parents in the diaspora that violate the rights of any child and wards to basic education should be sanctioned appropriately within the purview of the law. The need to reduce the quantum of out-of-school children and enforce the rights of the children provoked this bill. Meanwhile, the fine of the sum of 2,000 as provided in the Act to be paid by defaulting parents in today's value of the naira will not serve as a major deterrent or enough punitive measure for defaults. Hence, the inevitable need to increase the fine to 2,500, 250,000. Already today, the penalty is 2,000. This bill is proposing that we increase the penalty to 250,000 to have the maximum impact of deterring parents for violating the rights of any child to basic education in Nigeria. Consequently, the major section that the proposed bill sought to amend are Section 2, 4, B and C, and Section 3, subsection 2, Section 4, subsection 2, and to expunge Section 5. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, the UBE Act 2004 has since inception 20 years ago been successful to an extent and in certain aspects. However, considering the aspect of out-of-school children in our basic education system, which has been estimated to be about 20 million, the Act should be tinkered with, and which is what we are doing. Regrettably, the common defense by default parents has always been poverty and inability to afford the associated costs of sending their children and wards to school, including school transport and school uniform. In a blessed country, Nigeria, poverty should not continue to deter us deter the right of education to basic education, and consequently, deny the society of the benefit of a significant percentage of educated population. In conclusion, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Nigeria ranks high among countries with huge number of out-of-school children. Thus, the need to change course by strengthening the provision in the enabling laws that deter the abridging of the right of child to basic education, such as increasing fine payable by defaulting parents. We look at the bill also, the law. Fourth, in conclusion, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, history will be kind to us if the 10th Senate is able to strengthen the legislative objective as proposed in this bill, with the objective of reducing the number of out-of-school children and solidifying the bedrock of our national education, which is education. I therefore solicit your support for the second reading of this bill. I so submit.
Thank you. Okay, okay, sir.
And my name is Karimi Sunday Steve. I'm from Kogi State. I represent the people of Kogi West. First of all, I want to thank my sister, a specialist in education, for bringing this bill. In fact, she's a PhD holder. Mr. President, the bill which she's trying to amend, which was enacted in 2004, allowing for free and compulsory basic education for every child up to the age of 9. If we ask ourselves, has this bill impacted much on education in Nigeria? I would say not much has been achieved. Because even with this bill in place, most of the children within this age bracket, they've not been able to go to school. Education at that level is still not free. Let's be realistic. Even in our public school, education at primary school up to the age of 9 is not free. Most underprivileged children, they couldn't even afford education up to that level. Even my sister, as you mentioned it, you said in part of your presentation that some, because of
you have 1 minute remaining.
Because of poverty, they couldn't pay for their uniforms. They couldn't pay for transportation to school. So why I support the amendment? The amendment must be deeper than you have proposed. We need to amend this act further so that the purpose of the act will be at least achievable in the lap of these children, so that children within that age bracket are not denied the basic education. Thank you.
The former
President, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm Ahmed Lawan. I represent Yobe North. Mr. President, let me commend the sponsor of this bill, our dear sister and colleague, Senator Idiat Adebule, PhD. Mr. President, the reality of life is that education is supposed to be a right, especially at the basic level. It should be the right of the child to be educated up to that level, at least. Another reality, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, is poverty. Poverty is a reality. There are people who don't even feed 3 square meals in a day. And therefore, when it comes to sponsoring their children awards to schools, it becomes a most challenging enterprise. Some may have, but maybe not playing the right role of ensuring that they give education to those that deserve it. We have the unenviable position of being number one in the world, Mr. President, with over between 20 to 30 million out of school children. We are number one. Whatever anybody will say, Nigeria remains number one when it comes to basic education. Those who are supposed to transit from class 6 to JS1, they drop. Those who are supposed to transit from JS3 to SS1, some drop. That figure, Mr. President, is a huge percentage of the number of children that are supposed to be in schools in Nigeria. So it's a big developmental challenge for us as a country. And the burden, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, is supposed to be shared between the federal government and the states and local governments on the other hand. I believe that this 10th Senate should pursue this particular developmental challenge with utmost vigor and commitment because it undermines not only our social development, but our economic development and, of course, adverse effects on the security of our country. Those who are not able to go to school, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, will find their ways to the Boko Haram enclaves, to the bandits, to the militants, and so on and so forth. So I believe that we have every reason to devote sufficient or reasonable, significant resources to the development of our basic education. Mr. President, some states have shown little or no commitment to basic education. I served as chairman of House Committee on Education when I was in the House of Reps. States will deceive the federal government because normally there was supposed to be matching grant, and of course, when the states will wait for the federal government to give in its percentage, they will borrow money, put it there, and remove what they borrow, and utilize what the federal government gave them for something else. So we need to have serious oversight on what is happening in the implementation of the basic education. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for the privilege.
Senator Asu.
Mr. President, if I am anything today, is as a result of education. Not just education, but quality education. I believe that the best gift you can give any child is quality education. I support this bill in totality. I ask and I pray that we all put our support to it, that it is read a second time. I even ask and support her amendment to bring the penalties in line with current realities. The penalty of 2,000 naira a day as a penalty to erring parents is small in light of the current purchasing power parity of the naira. I support the rise of that penalty to 250,000. We must ensure, if we take a page from the example of the old Western region, where basic education was free and compulsory, it gave the Western region an edge over other regions. We must take a leaf out of that page and adopt that across the entire country. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
We'll make it this way because of time. Senator Sampson, then Senator Mongono.
It draws my interest on the floor. And naturally, I aligned with the traffic of opinion in favor of this amendment. This amendment seeks principally to give legal teeth and fangs, to the UBE Act. I think we need to do this because we need to set the fundamentals strong, to get the foundations right. I am one of those who believe, and strongly so, that once we get the foundations right, we are well on the way to advancement. So So I think these amendments would align the intentions, the broad intendments of the UB Acts with the Child Rights Act as well. It will promote education. It will set the right trajectory for our progress in this direction. The amendments have been well framed. It contemplates that the times have changed and that the times are changing. But beyond the spirit as captured in the amendment is a need that we have to give greater funding to education. It's not just enough for us to prescribe penalties. We must get right the enabling environment.
You have 1 second.
So that pressure is reduced on parents. Where there's so much pressure on the parents, the spectre, the prospect of out-of-school children will increase. But we need to discourage this trend.
Thank
and
you.
How do we discourage this trend?
Thank you.
We have to give thanks, as it were, to the law. I support this.
Thank you.
Bill,
Senator Mongono, you have the floor now.
To drive growth. Thank
Mongono, you have the floor. 1.5 minutes.
Distinguished President of the Senate, Ms. Mohamed Tahir Mongono, I represent Borno North Senatorial District. Well, my own submission is hinged on the fact that any society that toys or neglects with the education of its people does so at the risk of its own peril. And again, this bill is apt and germane, especially against the avalanche of out-of-school children that we have across the nooks and crannies of this country. This bill will go a long way in significantly reducing the number of out-of-school children and also give the Universal Basic Education Act the teeth to bite fiercely, and not only to back. I adopt the submission of all the previous speakers. Thank you.
Representing the good people of KB Central. Mr. President, let me commend the sponsor of this bill. It is very timely. All along we have been bringing motions regarding free and compulsory primary education. But now we have a bill, and this will certainly give it legal backing, making it compulsory for parents to send their ward to school. Nigeria remains the only country in the world where we have well over 20 million school children out of school. This is not acceptable, and perhaps this is why we have a lot of insecurity, particularly in areas where the number of out-of-school children are more. That is northwest and northeast, to some extent even the north central. We have less number in the southern part of the country. So I support this bill, and I urge all my colleagues to support it. And not only that, Mr. President, I want us to prescribe very stiff penalties to parents who refuse to send their children to school. That is the only way we can compel them. And in addition to that, Mr. President, governors that refuse to give counterpart funding, I think we should do something about it. Federal government has provided money for universal basic education, and all you need to do is give your own counterpart funding. And more than 16 states for now have refused to give counterpart funding. Something should be done to compel them to release their counterpart funding so that they can have access to this money. And this will certainly promote educational development in this country, and it will help us to reduce the number of school children out of school. So once again, I thank the sponsor of this motion, and I urge all my colleagues to support it. Thank you.
Oladele Kamarudin Oyewumi. I represent Osogbo Senatorial District, Osun State. I want to also join in commending the mover of this motion, the single Senator Idiat Adebule, because this is a very timely and very serious motion. You know, in Nigeria of nowadays, going by what is happening in the world, it will be highly suicidal for any child to be born and not be educated, not having basic education, compared to what is happening in the world now. This does not portend good thing for the country and should be taken very seriously. But, sir, our problem is not always in law making. It is always in implementation. And that is why I support most of the contribution of other senators. But I want to add two things. One of them is proper funding, as alerted by the former senator. And in that regard, sir, I think in tinkering with the law on this Free Compulsory Education Act, the UBEC, the responsibilities of UBEC should be looked into to make it more functional. And the issue of local government autonomy here comes out again. Because the issue of primary education rests squarely with the local government. If they have money, there are a lot they can do with the state government, and there must be a proper orientation in talking to the parent too. The government at both center, federal, state, and local government must take this as a matter of urgency to make sure that the parent are sufficiently sensitized, money are sufficiently provided, and the encouragement in both fora should be given to primary school so that these children will be attracted. One of such encouragement is the school feeding system that some states are doing in primary school, but unfortunately, it is not all the states that are doing this school feeding from primary 1 to primary 4. These are part of incentives that attract these children to go to school. I think in finalizing this act, maybe during the public debate, we should think of all various actions that should be taken to attract these children to school, and penalty has been suggested should be very stiff on parents that are recalcitrant in sending their children to school. I support the bill to be read the second time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Indeed, there must be a bit of sanction for any parent or guardian that has a child of school age and does not allow that child to go to school to obtain basic education. I had the opportunity to sign a bill into a law when I was a governor on free and compulsory basic education from primary to senior secondary school level. And we also enshrined provisions that carried up to 6 months imprisonment for any parent or guardian that has a child of school age and sends that child to go and hawk or to go to the farm during school days. And so we also had enforcers. We set up senior special assistants that went around the states to go around to check if any child was on the street or if any child was in a mechanic workshop of school age and was not in school, and those that were hawking or doing menial jobs, and then we arrested them, and then from there we traced the guardians and traced the parents, and of course they paid penalties, and some of them also had different levels of, so we must find a way to embellish within the act itself when eventually signed. Provisions for compulsion and provision for sanction. Otherwise, enforcement will be difficult. So I thank all those who have made contributions, and I thank the Civil Senator Idiat for bringing this to the fore. Now I put the question. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to amend the Compulsory Free Universal Basic Education Act, Cap N4, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, and for other matters connected therewith, 2024. Second reading taken. This bill is now referred to the Senate Committee on Education, Basic and Secondary, to report back within 2 weeks.